There are places on this earth where geography itself seems to have lost its mind. On a map, it is a ghost of blue, the memory of the Aral Sea. But to stand there is to witness its aftermath, an endless, sun-scorched expanse crusted in a shroud of white salt. This is the Aralsk, the youngest desert on the planet, born not of geologic time, but of human ambition and error. Here, among the dunes, lie the hulks of ships. Rusting trawlers and barges are frozen in a permanent "Schiss is a graveyard of hope." Yet, at the heart of this dead zone, where the water was once deepest, lies a territory that for decades was a black spot on every secret map, from NATO to the KGB. Vozrozhdeniya Island. The name translated out of killing, silently, invisibly, efficiently. This was the Barkhan Proving Ground. It was also known as Aralsk-Seven, the most secret, most guarded, and most terrifying laboratory in the Soviet Union. A place where the finest minds in microbiology twisted the science of healing into a weapon of strategic purpose. We have learned to fear nuclear war. We can visualize the mushroom cloud. We understand the physics of a shockwave and thermal radiation. It is a fear we can see. But the work done here was something more insidious. A biological weapon does not shatter cities. It does not melt glass. It leaves the infrastructure of a civilization untouched. It kills only that which breathes. The story of Aralsk-Seven began long before the Cold War. As early as the 1920s, the young Soviet state, feeling itself encircled by enemies, sought an asymmetric answer to its fears. The Red Army understood that the next great war would be fought not only with engines, but with microbes. They needed a proving ground, a place to let the genie out of the bottle, and, if something went wrong, a place to force it back in. The selection criteria were brutal. First, absolute isolation. The site had to be far from any border, where enemy reconnaissance planes could not photograph their work. Second, remoteness from Soviet industrial and population centers. The calculus was cold and clear. If a virus escaped, it must kill only the facility's own personnel, not the citizens of Moscow or Tashkent. The island was a cage designed to contain a monster of their own making. The question that haunts these sands is whether the cage truly held. A crucible of heat was required, a searing, relentless sun. Ultraviolet radiation, acting as nature's own sterilizing agent, was needed to purge the earth of bacteria after each experiment. The soil had to be parched, a guarantee that fugitive spores could not migrate with the groundwater. Vozrozhdeniya Island was the perfect candidate. 200 square kilometers of arid land, adrift in the heart of a vast saline lake. A natural moat, tens of kilometers wide, provided absolute isolation. There would be no accidental mushroom pickers, no wayward fishermen. There was only sand, salt, and the unforgiving sun. In 1936, the first expedition arrived, led by Professor Ivan Velikhanov. With them, they brought the first cultures of tularemia and plague. They lived in tents, their work carried out in the most primitive of circumstances. Yet their findings deeply impressed the High Command. By 1948, as the world fractured into two opposing blocks, the facility was granted the highest priority. Echelons of construction materials began to snake across the continent towards this remote shore. The city of Kantubek, also known as Aralsk-Seven, was born, and with it, the laboratory complex codenamed Barkhan. The island was cleaved in two, a residential zone to the north for the living, and to the south, a proving ground for death. The windrows had been studied with meticulous care. The prevailing winds almost always blew south, into the empty desert,
carrying the invisible aerosols away from the residential homes. But almost is a word that carries an exorbitant price in the world of biology.
Imagine a city in the middle of nowhere. Kantubek was a Soviet utopia built in the mouth of hell. It was home to 1,500 souls, scientists, military personnel, laboratory technicians, and their families. It was a closed world. Entry was possible only with a special pass, signed at the highest echelons of power. Departure was permitted only for an official leave or a state-sanctioned assignment. But for this isolation, the state paid generously. While the rest of the Union stood in queues for sausage, the shops of Kantubek were an impossible cornucopia. Caviar, condensed milk, imported furniture, the best books, and fresh fruit year-round. Salaries here were 3, sometimes 4 times higher than on the mainland. A single year of service was counted as 1.5.
They had their own school, a kindergarten, a stadium, and a park, filled with trees brought from afar, their roots quenched daily with precious water. There was a club that screened new films even before they reached the cinemas of Moscow. People lived lives of deceptive normalcy. They fell in love. They married. They brought children into this world. In the evenings, they would stroll along the waterfront, watching the sun bleed into the Aral Sea, swimming in its clear azure water.
It was a masterpiece of surrealism. Officers played volleyball on the sand. Their wives discussed the latest fashions, while their children built castles from the shore's fine grit. And just 3 kilometers to the south, behind a double perimeter of barbed wire, watched over by sentries and dogs, lay the zone, the laboratory complex, the factory of death.
The adults knew precisely where they worked, but the subject was never broached at home. The children knew only that their fathers were military chemists and that the South was forbidden, a taboo. This duality of being, this idyllic comfort perched atop a powder keg, forged a unique psychological climate, an atmosphere of both fatalism and a profound sense of being chosen. What happened beyond that perimeter? This was not science for the sake of discovery. This was the military-industrial complex in its most elemental form. Its product was known as biopreparat.
Here, on an island named for rebirth, humanity perfected the art of its own annihilation, proving that the most impenetrable walls are not made of wire or concrete, but are those built within the human mind, walls that separate the family dinner from the nth. A colossal secret structure, a state within a state, operating in the shadows of a superpower, tasked with a single chilling mandate: the mastery of biological warfare. Across a network of guarded institutes in Kirov, Sverdlovsk, Obolensk, and Zagorsk, an army of scientists toiled in absolute secrecy. They were the architects of an invisible apocalypse, working to create new and terrifying strains of disease. Inside these sterile laboratories, they sculpted life into a more perfect instrument of death. They taught ancient bacteria to resist the miracles of modern medicine, patiently exposing them to generation after generation of antibiotics until they became impervious. They meticulously altered their antigenic structures, rewriting their genetic code to render an enemy's vaccines utterly useless. They engineered them to be more volatile, to ride the wind further, more resilient, to survive the harsh glare of the sun. But theory required proof, and for that, there was a special place. A final proving ground where these creations would face their ultimate examination. Vozrojdenia Island. In a cruel twist of language, it was known as the Island of Rebirth. Here, on this desolate spit of land in the Aral Sea, the final product was delivered. Here, it would be graded on a single metric: its efficiency at killing. The testing range was a marvel of cold, scientific precision. A vast expanse divided into sectors, monitored by observation towers and a web of telemetry sensors that tracked every variable. At the heart of each sector, stark wooden posts were driven into the dry earth. Tethered to them were the test subjects, a veritable Noah's Ark of the condemned. White mice and guinea pigs, rabbits and sheep, even horses. But the most precious biological material, the closest proxy for the ultimate target, was the primate. Macaques, rhesus monkeys, and hamadryas baboons, brought by the thousand from nurseries in Sukhumi. Their physiology, their lungs, their circulatory systems, they were a near-perfect mirror of a human being.
They arrived on barges that cut through the sea, their decks crammed with cages. The animals, sensing their doom, would cry out, their calls of terror lost to the wind and waves. On the island, they were not merely tied to the posts. They were locked into special restraints, metal contraptions that held their heads in place, ensuring they could not shield their faces or turn away from the coming wind. Beside them, technicians placed impingers, air sampling devices that would measure the precise concentration of the weaponized aerosol.
Then, a drone would fill the sky. A specially converted bomber, an Ilyushin 28 or a Tupolev 16, would appear on the horizon. In place of its bomb load, it carried VAPs, Vylivnoy Aviatsionni Pribor, aircraft-mounted dispersal tanks. The pilot, orbiting high above, would receive the command, a button pressed, and from the sprayers beneath the wings, a plume would erupt. It was not a cloud of smoke, but a thin, barely perceptible mist, a fine liquid, or an almost invisible powder. The aircraft would bank, its grim task complete, and return to its distant, sterile base. Slowly, silently, the cloud would settle over the polygon. The animals would breathe it in. They felt nothing. There was no smell, no taste. This is the unique terror of the biological weapon. It arrives unseen, unheard, unfelt. Hours later, when the aerosol had dissipated, figures would emerge onto the field. They were collection teams, clad in the highest level of protective gear, the A4 or the Kvars suits. Sealed within their helmets, breathing from autonomous air shat, were still alive and transported them to the vivarium and the laboratory complex. Here, the most gruesome, most painstaking work began. Under the cold fluorescent lights, the subjects were placed under round-the-clock observation. Behind panes of thick glass, doctors with stopwatches and notebooks chronicled the inexorable march of death. They needed data, cold, hard numbers. In how many hours does the fever spike? When does the cough begin? At what point do the lungs fail? When does paralysis set in? When does the blood begin to seep from every orifice? They watched, with scientific detachment, as thousands of living creatures died in agony. And at the end of their meticulous records, a simple, damning conclusion would be written. Strain effectiveness confirmed. Lethality, 98%. After death came the autopsy. Pathologists worked to understand precisely how the virus or bacterium had dismantled the body from within. Organs were weighed, tissue samples were sliced and examined under microscopes. The corpses were then incinerated in special crematorium furnaces, the ash mixed with bleach and buried deep in the island's soil. Of all the horrors perfected in this place, one name stood above the rest. A specter from the darkest chapters of human history, now reborn with industrial might. It was the plague. The true legacy of this island is not the rust and ruin that remains, but a chilling philosophical question. It is a testament to humanity's ability to systematize horror, to turn the building blocks of life against life itself. The ultimate weapon is not the blinding flash of an atomic bomb, but the silent, invisible particle carried on a gentle breeze, a terror that does not announce its arrival, but simply waits in the air we breathe. In the dark pantheon of engineered plagues, there were many contenders for the throne. Tularemia, brucellosis, Q fever, typhus, and the terrifying Venezuelan equine encephalomyelitis, a disease capable of extinguishing a human life in roughly 40 hours. But among these specters of biological warfare, one reigned as the undisputed, unconditional queen: anthrax, Bacillus anthracis.
Why this particular bacterium? Because it was, in every conceivable way, the perfect soldier. Viruses are capricious things, fragile and demanding. They perish under the glare of sunlight, wither into nothingness when dry. They are utterly dependent on a living host to carry them forward. Anthrax, however, is the armored tank of the microbial world. Its genius lies in its ability to form a spore, a state of suspended animation, the bacterium encased in an almost impenetrable suit of biological armor. In this form, it can lie dormant in the dry earth for 100 years, a patient seed of devastation. It can withstand being boiled for an entire hour. It scoffs at the deepest frost. It is impervious to alcohol. It does not die. It simply waits. The moment that spore finds a favorable environment, the warm, moist sanctuary of human lungs, it awakens. The armor is shed. The bacterium begins to divide with terrifying geometric speed, unleashing a sophisticated three-component toxin. This poison does not merely kill, it systematically liquefies, transforming the intricate tissues of a living organism into a ruin of necrotic jelly. On a remote, wind-swept island in the Aral Sea, a place ironically named Vozrojdeniya, or Rebirth Island, Soviet scientists perfected their masterpiece of death. They called it Strain 836. It was the most potent, most virulent weaponized anthrax strain the world had ever known. Through painstaking selection and engineering, they had forged a monster resistant to the most common antibiotics. The standard treatments, the penicillin that was the bedrock of Western medicine, were useless against it. Vaccines developed by NATO forces offered little to no protection.
Far from the island, in the secret laboratories of the city known as Sverdlovsk 19, they industrialized this agent of apocalypse. The final product was not a liquid, it was a powder, a fine, pinkish-brown dust. The technology to create it was breathtakingly complex. The spores had to be meticulously dried without being killed, then milled to a precise particle size, between 1 and 5 microns.
This dimension was the key to its lethality. A particle larger than 5 microns would become trapped in the nose or throat, a nuisance rather than a death sentence. A particle smaller than 1 micron would simply be exhaled back out into the air. But in that perfect range, 1 to 5 microns, the spore was an unstoppable projectile. It would drift past all the body's upper respiratory defenses, settling deep within the lung's most delicate structures, the alveoli. From there, it was a direct gateway to the bloodstream. By the end of the 1980s, the Soviet Union had amassed hundreds of tons of this powder, a quantity sufficient to annihilate the entire population of the Earth several times over. Then, in 1988, a new doctrine of glasnost, of openness, began to radiate from Moscow. Mikhail Gorbachev sought to thaw the Cold War, and with this shift came the terrifying possibility of international inspectors demanding access to the empire's most secret facilities. A wave of panic rippled through the Kremlin. In the warehouses of Sverdlovsk lay mountains of irrefutable proof, a flagrant violation of the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention. The order came down: destroy it, all of it. But how does one destroy an indestructible soldier? How does one eliminate hundreds of tons of spores designed specifically to survive any cataclysm? They could not be burned. The risk of airborne release was too great. No filter could be trusted. They could not be dissolved. The weapon was too perfect. A new decision was made. If it cannot be destroyed, it must be hidden. Hidden in the most remote, desolate corner of the Soviet Empire. The deadly cargo was sealed into 250-liter stainless steel drums. As a desperate, almost futile gesture, a powerful disinfectant, chlorine bleach, was poured in with the spores. A ghost train began a silent pilgrimage, carrying its apocalyptic burden across half a continent to the port city of Aralsk. There, the drums were loaded onto military barges for their final journey to Rebirth Island. On the island, military excavators tore at the dry earth, gouging out 11 gigantic trenches, vast burial pits for an enemy that could not be killed. The barrels were unceremoniously dumped in, a frantic, clandestine funeral for a weapon that refused to die. They were buried, but not gone. A promise of plague, interred in the earth, waiting for the winds of time and the decay of its steel coffins to one day grant it a second life. A testament to an ingenuity so profound it could engineer its own extinction, yet could not devise a way to undo what it had made. Upon the island, after the pits are dug, they pour in the chlorine. Not merely a dusting, but tons of bleaching agent, a chemical scream intended to silence the life within. Then, the earth itself is brought in, a final, futile blanket meant to conceal the sin beneath. Bulldozers move with grim purpose, leveling the ground, erasing the scar from the landscape. Wooden stakes are driven into the soil, marked with numbers that signify nothing to the outside world, a cryptic code for a buried apocalypse. And then, they forget. They believed the chlorine would sterilize everything. They believed the stainless steel containers would hold for an eternity. They were wrong. In their hubris, they had not built a tomb. They had engineered the world's largest slow-action mine, an anthrax cemetery, patiently waiting. The myth of the island's impenetrable safety, however, would shatter long before the Soviet Union itself crumbled. The date was the 30th of July, 1971. In the vast, shimmering expanse of the Aral Sea, the research vessel Lev Berg went about its methodical work. Its crew of hydrobiologists was engaged in the routine sampling of water and plankton, monitoring the delicate ecology of the dying sea. The irony was a poison in the air, thicker than any fog. The ship maneuvered to a position 15 kilometers from the coast of the island. This was the designated safe zone. Official instructions strictly forbade any closer approach, but 15 kilometers is the edge of the horizon, a distance that feels absolute, yet is merely a line on a map. On the deck, a young female lab assistant stepped out from below. She sought a moment of fresh air as her colleagues processed their samples. The sea was calm, almost unnaturally still, wrapped in a light, hazy mist. At that very moment, on the island hidden by the haze, an experiment was underway. A controlled detonation, dispersing 400 grams of a newly perfected formulation of smallpox. Not the wild strain, but India 1, a weaponized, more virulent modification of the ancient plague. Then, the unpredictable happened. The atmosphere, a fickle servant, shifted. A weak, inconspicuous breeze, too subtle to be registered by the meteorologists in their towers, began to drift from the island, carrying with it an invisible, odorless cloud. It moved silently over the placid water, a phantom of death, and passed directly over the Lev Berg. The lab assistant, gazing out at the horizon, took a breath, and then another. She may have inhaled only a few viral particles. It was more than enough. The smallpox virus, variola major, is an engine of terrifying efficiency.
The ship eventually turned for home, returning to the port of Aralsk, a bustling town of 50,000 souls. The woman disembarked and went home to her family, to her children, carrying a passenger she could not see or feel.
Within days, the invasion began. A rising fever, a deep ache that settled common respiratory infection. When she failed to improve, they suspected an allergic reaction to antibiotics. But then the rash appeared. Not just a rash, but the distinctive, horrifying pustules, each one beginning to blacken at its center. In the clinic, an old infectious disease specialist, a man who remembered the epidemics of a previous century, saw her skin, and his face went pale with a primordial fear. He knew. This was not an allergy. This was variola major, black smallpox, a monster the world believed it had all but slain.
The alarm was sounded, not through public channels, but through the secure lines of the KGB and the Ministry of Health. In Moscow, the reaction was instantaneous and brutal. The city of Aralsk was sealed. Military forces established a cordon, a ring of steel around 50,000 people. No one in, no one out. Trains on the main line thundered through the Aralsk station without stopping, their carriage windows sealed shut. To prevent the contagion of panic, all telephone lines were severed, plunging the city into an information black hole. Special flights, under military escort, descended on the local airfield, delivering thousands of doses of the smallpox vaccine. A total, citywide vaccination campaign began. Medical brigades in full PR. The KGB, meanwhile, initiated a vast contact tracing operation. Every person who had spoken to the lab assistant, who had ridden the same bus, who had stood near her in a queue, was hunted down, rounded up, and forced into isolation in hastily erected quarantine barracks.
At the woman's home, a cleansing fire consumed everything. Furniture, clothing, books, even the wallpaper was stripped from the walls and incinerated. Her neighbors were forcibly evacuated.
In the final tally, 10 people contracted the disease. 3 of them died.
Among the dead was the lab assistant's own younger brother, who had a medical condition that prevented him from being vaccinated.
That the virus was contained within the city walls was not a triumph of medicine, but a chilling testament to fortune. Had just one infected person, asymptomatic and unaware, boarded the Aralsk to Moscow train before the lockdown, the Black Plague would have raced across the entire Soviet Union. A single breath of wind, a single unsuspecting traveler, was all that stood between a regional crisis and a continental catastrophe. It was a stark reminder that the greatest threats are not always the ones we see, but the ones we create, bury, and try to forget.
The wind answers to no authority. It carries the dust of forgotten empires and the seeds of future harvests. But on one spring day in 1971, it carried something else. A pestilence. A silent, invisible cloud that drifted from its island prison and settled over the nearby port city of Aralsk. And then, the world.
The incident was buried under the highest levels of classification. In the sanitized official documents, the cause of the sudden, lethal outbreak was never named. The world would not learn the truth until 2002, when General Pyotr Burgasov, the former chief sanitary physician of the Soviet Union, finally broke his silence. His testimony was the first irrefutable proof. The island was a crucible for doomsday weapons, and it was proof that no isolation, no matter how remote, could ever offer a perfect guarantee. You cannot command the wind.
A geopolitical earthquake, a century in the making, sent shockwaves across 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. Between 1900 and 1991, a system that had presented itself as eternal simply disintegrated. It crumbled in a matter of months. With its collapse, the lifeblood of its vast military programs, the funding, ceased instantaneously. In November of 1991, the garrison at Kantubek, the secret city on Vozrojdenya Island, received its final order from a dying Moscow: evacuate the facility. This was not a planned, orderly transfer of power. It was a panicked flight. The population, scientists, soldiers, their families, was given just 24 hours to gather what they could. They abandoned everything else. Apartments, still holding the faint warmth of family life, were left with furniture and dishes on the table. Libraries filled with rare volumes, their stories silenced. Garages entombed with personal automobiles for which there was no road out, no barge to carry them away. In the streets, a strange ritual unfolded. Secret documents were burned in open barrels, the papers curling into black ash. A dark snow stamped with the ghost of the words "top secret" swirled over the doomed city.
But the most terrifying scenes were taking place inside the laboratories. The scientists, preparing for their own exodus, were leaving a kingdom of dormant terrors behind, viral cultures. But in the chaos, who was there to verify their work? Was the concentration of the solution sufficient? Had the rubber gaskets on the autoclaves held under pressure? Refrigerators humming with entire collections of weaponized viruses were unplugged from their power sources. The complex air filtration systems shuddered to a halt. The great hermetic doors were sealed one last time. But without maintenance, their rubber seals would immediately begin to dry, to crack, to fail.
By 1992, the island was empty. The last soldier walked off the pier, and a profound silence descended. The territory itself was now an orphan of geopolitics, its territory divided between the newly independent nations of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. These nascent states had nations to build, borders to define, economies to salvage. A secret Soviet polygon of plagues was a problem for another day. There was no money for guards, no resources for decontamination. The security detail was withdrawn. The most dangerous object on the face of the earth was left utterly without supervision.
The gates to Armageddon were not just unlocked, they were swung wide open.
And then they came. The scavengers, the stalkers of the steppe. At first, they were desperate local fishermen, their livelihoods destroyed by the receding Aral Sea, looking for anything to biohazard, but a ghost town overflowing with treasure. They tore the copper veins from the walls of schools and homes. They cut away the heating pipes. They dismantled electric motors and heavy transformers. They peeled back the aluminum and stainless steel skin of the laboratories themselves. They had no idea where they were. The name Aralsk-Seven meant nothing to them. It was just another abandoned military town in the vast wreckage of a fallen empire. They used crowbars to violate the hermetically sealed containment boxes. They shattered glass vials, tasting the contents in the desperate hope of finding alcohol. They emptied the charcoal from the ventilation filters, filters dense with invisible spores, merely to claim the metal casings for scrap. They lived in the forsaken apartments of the scientists, sleeping in their beds. They cooked their meals over fires fueled by the very furniture that had once furnished the homes of the island's master. How many of them died in the wee?
In the small coastal villages, doctors merely noted inexplicable outbreaks of strange and aggressive pneumonias.
The empire that built this place is gone. Its flags folded, its anthems forgotten. But the pathogens remain. They are PUV biology, a final whispered threat from a world that was, waiting for a wind that is yet to come.
The first signs were subtle and easily dismissed. A sudden fever, a bloom of dark ulcers upon the skin. In the scattered settlements bordering the Aral Sea, no one connected these afflictions with the forbidden island shimmering in the heat haze offshore. The true vectors of disease were not the wind or the water, but men. Marauders, picking through the bones of a dead empire, carried the contagion away on the soles of their worn boots, in the treads of their rusting trucks. They brought with them scraps of metal, biologically and radioactively contaminated, which were melted down in crude furnaces, reborn as cooking pots for family meals, as rebar to reinforce the foundations of new homes. It was a quiet, creeping, and invisible export of death.
But the most devastating blow would not be delivered by man directly. It would come from nature, pushed to a breaking point. The Aral Sea, once a vast inland ocean fed by the great Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers, was dying. Its lifeblood had been diverted, siphoned away to irrigate immense cotton fields, a white harvest that demanded a catastrophic price. The ecological collapse of a region became the catalyst for a biological nightmare. Year after year, the water receded by kilometers, leaving behind a toxic desert of salt and sand. The salinity of the remaining water skyrocketed, killing the once thriving fisheries and turning the sea into a sterile, hypersaline lake.
Then, in the year 2001, the inevitable occurred. The shallow strait separating Vozrojdeniya Island, the Island of Rebirth, from the mainland simply evaporated. The island, for decades a secret laboratory for the world's most terrifying pathogens, ceased to be an island. It became a peninsula. The natural moat that had guarded the world from its buried horrors was gone. In its place, a land bridge had formed, a perfect, unimpeded highway. And across this new bridge, life began to move. A great migration began. Herds, but most dangerous of all were the rodents. Gerbils, gophers, and voles, the primary natural reservoirs of plague, scurried into this new frontier, seeking food and space. They began to dig, burrowing into the soft, contaminated earth. Inevitably, their claws broke through into the burial pits, the mass graves of laboratory animals deliberately infected with weaponized pathogens. They gnawed their way into a Pandora's box of horrors.
They could become infected, and they could carry the engineered strains of bubonic plague and anthrax back to the mainland. On their fur, in their blood, within their very bodies, they would transport the apocalypse. As infected animals migrated back, mixing with the healthy mainland populations, the chain of transmission was forged. Epidemiologists have a sterile term for this: biological agent breakout. The natural hotspots of plague in Central Asia had always been a concern, but now they could be joined by an artificial super hotspot, one created by human hands, armed with strains resistant to modern medicine. And then there was the air itself. The vast, exposed seabed of the Aral was now a source of monumental dust storms. Winds lifted millions of tons of salt, sand, and agricultural chemicals into the atmosphere. These toxic saline tempests could travel for hundreds of kilometers. If this dust contained anthrax spores, which are lightweight and terrifyingly volatile, the wind could delay a missile, but by the weather itself. Subsequent mailing of anthrax-laced letters in the United States, the American government was seized by a new kind of fear.
Biological terrorism was no longer a theoretical threat. It was a reality. Intelligence reports pointed to Uzbekistan, to a former Soviet test site where hundreds of tons of the very substance used in those letters lay buried in the ground. Only these were far more virulent, concentrated, weapon-grade strains. And this proving ground was, for all intents and purposes, unguarded. Any terrorist with a jeep, a shovel, and a sack could drive into the desert, dig up a bucket of death, and leave. No complex laboratory was needed. The only requirement was the will to dig.
In response, the United States allocated millions of dollars for a cleanup operation. But the deeper truth remained. The weapons had not been disarmed. They had merely merged with the landscape. The spores had become one with the dust. The bacteria had entered the food chain. Man had created a monster, and in his arrogance had allowed the very earth to become its keeper. The line between a weapon and the environment had been erased, leaving behind not just a contaminated island, but a permanent living testament to the long shadow of human ambition. In the desiccated heart of what was once the Aral Sea, a secret was brokered. A quiet pact was struck with the government of Uzbekistan, setting the stage for an operation of unprecedented gravity. In the spring of 2002, a team of specialists descended upon a desolate peninsula known as Vozrojdeniya Island of Rebirth. The name, a cruel irony for a place that had become a cradle of death. Leading them was Brian Hayes, the Pentagon's foremost expert on weapons of mass destruction. They moved across the scorched earth not as soldiers, but as apparitions from another world, clad in brilliant white, overpressurized protective suits. Each man was a self-contained ecosystem, completely sealed from the toxic air, his life sustained by an autonomous breathing apparatus. Their objective was a legacy of the Cold War's darkest chapter. 11 burial pits, dug in 1988, containing a weaponized strain of anthrax. What they found there, however, defied their worst projections. The stainless steel barrels, designed to contain the plague for centuries, had surrendered to the elements. They were corroded, buckled, and leaking. The very ground around them was saturated with dormant spores, the concentration so high it overwhelmed their instruments. In some areas, a viscous, pinkish sludge had oozed to the surface, a grotesque symptom of the sickness festering below. The Soviet solution had been a catastrophic failure. The chlorine lime they had used to sterilize the pits had not killed the spores. Instead, it had formed a hard, protective crust, beneath which the bacteria had simply entered a state of suspended animation. The Americans chose a different path. Theirs was a strategy of brute force, born of necessity. To excavate and transport hundreds of tons of contaminated soil was unthinkable. A single breached container could unleash a pandemic, so they brought the weapon to the poison. Thousands of tons of industrial-grade calcium hypochlorite, a bleach of terrifying potency, were ferried to the island. For months, under a sun that baked the salt flats to 50 degrees Celsius, the team waged their war. They unearthed the pits, exposing the festering earth. They drenched the land in chemicals. Giant rotating augers were driven deep into the ground, churning the soil and the bleach together, meter by agonizing meter, transforming the burial sites into a sterile, dead slurry. Inside their heavy suits, the men worked to the point of collapse, their every breath a testament to the invisible enemy surrounding them. Finally, the operation was declared a success. The threat, they announced, had been eliminated. The spores were dead.
But was the monster truly slain? The team had neutralized the 11 known pits, their locations taken from maps provided by Ken Alabek, the former first deputy director of the Soviet bioweapons program, Biopreparat, who had defected to the United States. But what of the other sites? The undocumented burials from decades prior, the makeshift dumps for failed experiments, the hastily dug graves for thousands of infected animal carcasses. The island spans 200 square kilometers. To scan every dune, to test every meter of salt-cracked earth was an impossibility. Experts concede with grim honesty, a territory this vast and this contaminated can never be guaranteed clean. The risk can only be reduced.
And Anthrax knows how to wait. A single surviving spore, patient and resilient, is all it takes to seed a new colony. Today, the former Island of Rebirth is a dead zone. Though its territory is formally divided, border guards are a rare sight. The land is too dangerous, the mission too pointless, the cost too high. The only visitors are stalkers, extreme tourists, and the occasional journalist, drawn by the macabre allure of a world abandoned in haste. Their stories paint a chilling portrait. The landscape is a post-apocalyptic nightmare of red, saline earth, where almost nothing grows, punctuated by the twisted skeletons of dead trees. The ruins of the military town, Kantubek, stand as a sinister monument. Books and gas masks litter the floors, and chalk writings from 1991 remain frozen on the blackboards. The laboratories are a chaos of shattered glass and rusted centrifuges, where the skeletons of test monkeys lie forgotten in their cages. But the most disturbing accounts speak of the wildlife. Eyewitnesses tell of reptiles of anomalous size, thriving in an ecosystem poisoned by man. It is a haunting suggestion that in this place, where humanity sought to perfect death, life itself has become twisted and strange. Vozrojdenya is more than just a contaminated island. It is a monument to a secret war, a warning etched into the earth itself. The weapons may be buried, but the legacy remains, a microscopic seed of terror sleeping just beneath the sand. It does not forget, it only waits. Tales whisper from the desiccated shores of the Aral Sea. Stories of monitor lizards that charge without fear, of serpents that defy a killing blow. They speak of rodents, their fur matted with weeping ulcers, creatures warped by an unseen influence. This could be dismissed as folklore, ghost stories told around a dying fire. Yet beneath the myth lies an undeniable truth. The biological impact on this ecosystem is profound and irreversible. An invisible legacy has been written into the very DNA of this land. We cannot know how these meticulously engineered combat strains will behave now that they are free. Released into the wild, they mingle with the native microflora in an unholy communion. In the microscopic realm, horizontal gene transfer is not theory. It is the currency of survival. Bacteria trade skills. Imagine if a single gene for antibiotic resistance, harvested from the infamous strain 836, finds its way into a common soil bacterium, and from there into the pathogen that causes plague, or the vibrio that carries cholera. The result would not be a microbe, it would be a super predator, a new form of pestilence against which the entire arsenal of modern medicine would be rendered useless. The evolutionary cauldron on the island continues to boil, unwatched, uncontrolled. The story of Vozrojdenya, the Island of Rebirth, is not a tale of the past. It is our present and our future. It stands as a monument to human hubris, a testament to a cynicism so profound it was willing to weaponize life itself. We learned to manipulate the code of existence, to create demons from the dust, yet we never learned to control them. We forged a weapon that lives, that evolves, that obeys no command to cease fire. While humanity debates nuclear disarmament and cyber threats, A force slumbers in the sands of the Aralsk-Seven, a silo of contagion capable of claiming more lives than all the world's atomic bombs combined. It requires no launch codes, no satellites, no generals. It needs only a passing breeze or a single curious ground squirrel. The Aral Sea had to die to reveal this truth. As its waters receded, the seabed was laid bare, and what was secret was made manifest. And now, when the wind scours the ruins of Kantubek, it lifts that poisoned dust, carrying it not into the void, but towards our cities, towards us. It is the ultimate reminder. A war against nature cannot be won. When you turn life itself into a weapon, you must be prepared for the day it turns upon its creator. A biological clock is ticking, its cadence echoing in the silence of a dead sea, and no one knows how much time remains until midnight.